Pippa and Thomas, a young couple, are super excited to finally move into their dream apartment in downtown Montreal after waiting for what feels like forever. Pippa is an ophthalmic assistant, and Thomas works from home as a musician and video creator. On their first night together, Pippa asks Thomas to hold off on having kids for 4 years so they can enjoy some time just for themselves after her medical school journey. He agrees, and as they toast to their decision, they can't help but notice their neighbors, a good-looking couple, getting a little too cozy right in front of them. Pippa suggests they look away, but Thomas thinks it's not really spying since it's all out in the open. Pippa insists he stop, and after a frustrating night where Thomas falls asleep before they can connect, she heads to bed feeling annoyed. The next morning, she shares the story with her friend Ari. Ari thinks it's totally fine to watch such open displays of affection, but Pippa isn't on board with that. Later, her boss surprises her with a Japanese lantern as a housewarming gift. When Pippa gets home, Thomas has a sweet surprise for her, a painting that represents their love. As they hang the lantern outside, they start imagining their neighbors, giving them the names Margot and Brent. Suddenly, Brent starts coughing and looks like he's in trouble, while Margot dances away, completely oblivious. They shout for Margot, but she doesn't hear them. Just in time, she notices Brent and rushes to help him. That night, Pippa can't sleep and finds herself back at the window, drawn to the sight of Brent and Margot being intimate. She sees Margot leaving with a suitcase while Brent, looking half-dressed, waves goodbye. When Brent turned to check out Margot, Pippa was so busy staring at him that when he finally caught her eye, she got startled and accidentally dropped a glass, shattering it. The next night, Pippa noticed some binoculars in a store window and decided to grab them so she and Thomas could get a closer look at their neighbors. They kept spying and saw Brent greeting a new girl, his model, and quickly charming her. This sparked Pippa and Thomas's own interests. That night, Pippa was restless, her mind racing with thoughts of Brent and Margot. Out of curiosity, she peeked at the neighbors and saw Margot coming home, realizing that Brent was being unfaithful. The following day, Pippa, Thomas, Ari, and Joni, Thomas's sister, were at a restaurant discussing the odd dynamics of Brent and Margot's relationship. Thomas threw out the idea that they might be part of the small group of couples known as swingers. Joni asked Siri about it, and it turned out that around 15% of couples are into extramarital fun, which shocked everyone except Pippa, who felt bad for Margot, while the others found it hilarious. Pippa wished she could hear what Brent and Margot were saying, which reminded Joni of a funny college story. She recalled how Thomas had a crush on a girl named Killy, and they set up a laser pointer to eavesdrop on her chats to see if she liked him back. Pippa got all excited about that and asked Thomas to show her how it worked. On their way home, Thomas explained that they could use the device to spy on their neighbors, but they'd need a special mirror in their apartment, which is against the law. Pippa came up with a plan. They decided to sneak into Brent's Halloween party without an invite. Once inside, Brent lifts Pippa and takes her to his photo shoot, leaving a shocked Thomas behind. Brent dramatically pushes Thomas into a chair, leans in close to Pippa, and poses her leg on the chair. Pippa's heartbeat races as Brent snaps a photo before disappearing into the crowd. Seizing the moment, Thomas hides Pippa behind his cloak to attach the reflector, and then excitedly heads home to implement their plan. They quickly return home, activate the microphone, and aim the laser at the reflector. They adjust the microphone with the laser pointer, while Thomas sets up the computer for clear sound. As they wait for the signal, Pippa erases a love painting and uses chalkboard erasers to trace the laser in the dust, which works. Now, not only can they see, but also hear the couple. The first thing they catch is an argument with Margot accusing Brent of cheating. He responds by hitting her and breaking a glass. The next day, Pippa unexpectedly sees Margot at their clinic, buying new glasses. During her eye exam, Pippa strikes up a friendly conversation and Margot calls her a cool girl. Margot then invites Pippa to meet up over the weekend. Pippa gives her her number and Margot leaves. That night, Pippa tells Thomas she met Margot, whose real name is Julia, and they really connected. They plan to meet over the weekend. Thomas thinks this is crazy and warns her against spying on their neighbors and canceling the meeting. Pippa argues that if she were cheating, he would know, asserting it's her moral duty to help Julia. Thomas wants Pippa to focus on their relationship, recalling their earlier discussions about their future together. He fears he isn't enough for her, but Pippa reassures him and continues talking about her plans. Frustrated, Thomas storms out to go to the bar. The next day, Pippa meets Julia at a local spa. Julia opens up about her life, sharing that her husband Sebastian, whom she calls Seb, means everything to her. She reveals she's an ex-model currently without a career and feels lost and mentally fragile. Pippa suggests they meet again, and they say goodbye. Later at home, Pippa becomes increasingly obsessed, watching Seb and Julia from her window as the atmosphere in her home grows tense. That night, unable to sleep, she carefully accesses the computer to spy, trying to avoid waking Thomas. This time, she decides to take a risk and sends a text to Julia through their printer. When she tests it, Julia crumples the message. Seeing this, Pippa quickly sends another. "Is your husband cheating on you?" Confused and scared, Julia wonders who sent it. Pippa then messages her again, stating that she found a used condom in the bathroom trash. Julia goes to check and discovers the condom. Overwhelmed with frustration and sadness, she begins to cry. Meanwhile, Thomas wakes up, angry. Pippa expresses her concern, saying she can't just sit by. Upset, Julia heads to the kitchen to grab a knife to harm Seb, but hesitates. Meanwhile, Thomas, anxious about Pippa's actions and their potential consequences, angrily breaks the binoculars. The next morning, Thomas wakes Pippa, expressing his disappointment. She hugs him and promises not to use the binoculars again. Just when it seems like things have settled, Pippa sees Seb trying to wake a bloody Julia. She has committed suicide. At this point, Thomas can't take it anymore and tells Pippa he's leaving. She pleads with him to stay, feeling scared and in need of support. But Thomas blames her for Julia's death and walks out. Pippa spends the night in tears. The day after Julia's passing, she heads back home, constantly glancing at Seb and picturing herself comforting him. When Seb decides to hit up a bar, Pippa quickly follows him. At the bar, she keeps a low profile, wanting to approach him but feeling unsure. Seb spots her and invites her to join him while he waits for his partner. Pippa agrees, and soon Seb starts asking her about porn and masturbation, curious if her partner's actions impact her emotions. Pippa responds that they likely don't. Seb shares that he's had plenty of casual flings, insisting that not all sex counts as cheating. Pippa doesn't see it that way. Seb apologizes for being all over the place, explaining he's dealing with a rough breakup. After a few drinks, he asks Pippa if she wants to take some photos, which she happily agrees to. At his place, Seb starts with some typical shots. Things quickly turn steamy. Seb takes off his shirt and asks Pippa to do the same for some underwear shots, which leads to them having sex all night long. Meanwhile, Thomas comes home to an empty house and calls out for Pippa, but there's no answer. He grabs his favorite juice and pours the leftovers into a bird feeder. While distracted, he notices something odd and grabs his binoculars to take a closer look. What he sees shatters him. Pippa is in bed with Seb, the very guy she said she was trying to save Julia from. The next morning, Pippa comes home to find the door open, which sends a chill down her spine. She steps inside, cautiously, and finds a fallen bouquet, only to be hit with the shocking sight of Thomas having hanged himself. She realizes she's indirectly caused 2 deaths. A day after the funeral, Pippa spots an ad for Seb's exhibition. She returns home, puts on a brave face, and meets her friend Ari. Pippa recounts the events that led to Thomas's death, feeling responsible for the tragedy. Ari reassures her that she shouldn't blame herself, as Thomas ended their relationship, and she had the right to make her own choices. Pippa wonders if it's illogical to see Seb again, feeling that it might help her move on. Ari asks where Seb is, and Pippa mentions it's the opening night of his exhibition. They go together to the packed event. Seb notices Pippa, takes a picture, and casually says he didn't expect her there. Pippa shows interest in the photos and spots the woman who rented them the apartment. Seb then takes the stage to announce that the exhibition is a collaboration with his late wife, Julia. Pippa, disturbed by this, tells Ari she wants to leave. Seb invites Julia's memory to join him on stage, and Pippa is shocked to see her invoked. Julia describes the exhibition as a modern fable about Pippa, pointing her out in the audience. One by one, the covers of the paintings come off, revealing photos of Pippa and Thomas from their time in the apartment, ending with images of Thomas's suicide. Seb explains that when Pippa and Thomas moved in, their future seemed bright, but their obsession with others' lives led to emotional turmoil, devastated and manipulated. Pippa leaves the exhibition and heads to Seb and Julia's apartment. She uses the key to enter and discovers a door leading to a rooftop. Climbing the stairs, she finds a photography studio filled with cameras that were capturing their every moment. In a fit of rage, she destroys the studio. Days later, Seb and Julia are interviewed by Japanese media about their project. When asked if their actions were morally acceptable, given that Pippa and Thomas signed a lease without reading it, They explain that the last page granted permission to be photographed. After the interview, Pippa follows them. When Seb and Julia return home, they find a bottle of wine gifted to them. Julia remarks that they're tired of congratulatory gifts. And when she checks the attached note, she sees it's from the Tate. They share a drink together. A little while later, they get a message that reads, "I know." The next one says, "I know Thomas didn't take his own life." The third message accuses, "You killed him." Seb glances out the window and spots Pippa on the roof. She bolts with Seb and Julia hot on her heels. Pippa ducks into the attic, and the two of them follow her inside. She hides out in her office, where Seb and Julia eventually track her down. Shaken, Pippa confesses that she knows they drugged Thomas and made his death look like a suicide. Julia brushes off her claims as a crazy theory, insisting she needs proof. Pippa admits she doesn't have any evidence, but stands firm that she knows what really happened. She accuses Seb of using and betraying her, claiming they can't harm her anymore. Suddenly, Julia feels lightheaded and collapses. Pippa reveals to Seb that she was the one who sent the wine from the Tate, and that he and Julia will soon be out cold too. Seb falls to the ground as well. Pippa leans in, whispering that she'll be the last thing he sees. She then drags them to a laser machine and starts burning their corneas with a high-powered surgical laser. A few days later, two new tenants move into the apartment. One glances at Seb and Julia's old place, and when asked about it, the other tells him to mind his own business. Meanwhile, in the opposite apartment, Sebastian and Julia are now blind. This is where the movie ends. Subscribe if you enjoyed.